Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our first of many budget meetings that we will have with our city officials. And today is Monday, February 1st, 2021. I'd like to mention that in the back of the room is posted is the Open Meeting Act, and we're all present. We were all present until Mr. Shove decided to sneak out. He'll be right back. So we'll go ahead and start this, and we'll have Mr. John Carlson start us off.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. I am John Carlson, and I work in the mayor's office. And one of the many jobs I have the pleasure of performing is working with our departments and our budget team as we and the city council as we all work together to strategize systems and programs, services that will continue to meet the important outcomes we're trying to achieve for the community. And I think we'll get to City TV. We're going to have some presentations today, some PowerPoints, and those will get switched on here shortly. You'll be able to view those. But thought I'd start with the big picture just to kind of tee up what's happening. I mentioned those important outcomes. Of course, the biggest outcome that we talk about is leading Lincoln towards a more successful, secure, and shared future. And we try and break that down into sort of 5 areas, 5 performance areas within which we're able to do work, and we're able to try and measure the success of that work and then alter that work in order to continue to do even better with every program and service that we provide. Safe and healthy city, innovative, operationally excellent city, vibrant city economy, quality of life, equitable and inclusive city, and strong and resilient city. And it's important to note that all departments do projects and programs and services that support all of these outcomes. But we sort of teed up different departments to sort of illustrate ones that maybe have a particular focus on that or a particular outcome area that they want to talk about that. So just to kind of frame for folks watching, kind of a little bit about where we are and what we're up to. From our biennial budget resolution, the charter and the ordinance both speak to how we should set our budget calendars and the work that we should do in order to make sure that the public is able to follow along, understand what their points of engagement are, and to give us all a frame of reference to work in as we partner up together and how we develop the budget. So you can see a little bit from the biennial budget resolution. In January and February, what are we up to now? We're going to have departments and directors and staff brief the council, talk a little bit about their performance indicators and their data, whether they see upcoming changes, kind of trends that are happening in the current budget. So we want to do a check-in part on this too, and then sort of begin the discussion on the 21-22 budget to come. Again, as council knows, but to remind folks that may be watching, we're in kind of a unique circumstance where normally we would be doing a mid-biennium check-in, which would be the midpoint between the 2 biennial budget years. We decoupled the budget because of the pandemic needs. The city charter does allow the 1-year or the 2-year budget, so we're able to do that. And I think the wisdom of how we're able to push through this current budget that we're in right now and the ability to be more nuanced and flexible in the development of the next year's budget is going to bear out the wisdom of that. So we do have the 2 separate budgets. Obviously they're related, and much of the city work that happens every year will continue to happen. But there are also different flavors for different budgets. Certainly the pandemic crisis and the economic impacts of that really dominated the discussion of the budget that we developed for this year, for 20 and 21. I do want to take a moment of personal preference just to sort of elevate really how amazing the city staff and departments are, the work that they were able to perform, the way that they were able to be nimble and respond to the needs in the community, council included, residents included, everybody. But city performance during the pandemic crisis was really amazing, and I don't want to miss a chance to kind of call them out for the great work that they did. And even beyond the pandemic, continuing to do investments in infrastructure and quality of life improvements, that kind of the core city business to keep the city going. 21-22, as we begin to pull out of the COVID crisis and we begin to look towards recovery and strength building, it'll have more of that kind of a flavor, we think. Continuing to invest in the economy and great neighborhoods and continuing to build the kind of post-COVID community that we want. So again, where are we now? Well, we're at the beginning. We're at the beginning of that 2nd year, in kind of a unique spot because we're not starting from scratch. Departments had done some work previously in setting up a 2nd year budget. But why are we here? Well, departments want to check in on their performance and goals. They want to check in with the council on their 3-year budget and personnel trends. So you'll see that they'll pull up the budget book and they'll pull up budget pages out of there to show you the 3-year trends that are happening in there. I apologize in advance, that font will be very small because the budget book has a lot of numbers in it. You've got a PDF so you can zoom in. They'll also be elevating particular things in there. And again, that information is available online for anybody that has questions or wants to refer to it. But probably the most important part beyond the check-in and the sort of tee up about ideas that they have really is to kick off this discussion in our partnership about what council's thinking and ideas that you have. It's not a one and done. This is a kickoff, a public presentation to let them know, that the public can start thinking too. We'll obviously be working with you week by week and month by month as we begin to put a draft package together. Here's a chance to check in, start the discussion, and begin to talk about ideas. Today we're going to talk about the first outcome, safe and healthy city. They're not prioritized in a particular area, although safe and healthy city clearly has borne out in this last year to be obviously an important one. And just to reiterate to the public, we are committed to providing a safe and healthy city where residents can rely on prompt, effective public service where it is most needed. And just so that I say it again, all departments are involved in that outcome. It's a top priority, as it is a top priority for council. Today we're going to hear from Lincoln Police, Lincoln Fire and Rescue, and Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, and they'll sort of talk about how they support that priority, but other outcomes as well. I'll be here, I'll be taking notes as in previous budget presentations. We have budget staff too, so we'll be writing down comments. If you have questions that could get answered today, we'll answer them today. If we have questions that need more information, as in before, we'll record them down, we'll catalog those and get you any information that you need coming out of that. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Police Chief Jackson and invite him up to come up and talk a little bit about Lincoln Police Department.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon. Book already. I think several of you saw the article this morning in the newspaper, so I take great pride in representing the men and women of the Lincoln Police Department, and it is a partnership. Our successes are our successes, and our challenges are our challenges. So we are very happy to be part of a strong City of Lincoln partnership with all of our different departments as well as the public we serve. So, our mission statement has been this for about 20 years now. We, the members of the Lincoln Police Department, work with all people, are committed to providing quality services that promote a safe and secure community. That's our overall mission. We have a number of values. I don't think I need to read these to you. You have them in front of you, but our goal is to preserve life, enhance public safety by working in partnership with the community we serve. So that in a breakdown is our organizational values. How do we do that? We ensure the public safety, health through the quality of life. We deploy our resources through data-driven, research-driven processes. We are, as anybody that's aware of Lincoln Police Department, we're very much data-driven in how we respond to issues across the city. And we build and maintain positive relationships. That's an expectation from my position all the way down to the newer recruits that are sitting in the academy today. So to build and maintain the relationships we have with the public. Sir Robert Peel in the early 1800s says the police are the public and the public are police, and that's kind of what we follow. How do we build a more equitable, inclusive, and resilient city? We are stronger when our workforce reflects the diversity of our community. We strive to do that in our hiring. Certainly, that is a challenge to us, and I would tell you today we don't reflect the diversity of our community, but we strive to achieve that in every hiring cycle. We utilize comprehensive training to include anti-bias and cultural competency training to meet the expectation of our community. This was a recent legislative mandate that we were well ahead of. We've been doing this for quite some time and educating our staff toward anti-bias and cultural competencies. And continue services to the community during a pandemic. 2020 brought a number of challenges to the Lincoln Police Department, both the civilian and commissioned staff. Certainly issues related to the pandemic. 2, the civil unrest over the summer. And 3, the loss of an officer, all 3 causing significant impact on our men and women of our department. But through all of those things, we strive to provide a quality police service, ensuring safety, security, and overall quality of life for those we serve. Our performance indicators, and I have graphs that meet these, but one is the violent crime rate. You'll find that our violent crime rate is up. And I'll talk more about that when I get to that slide, but our violent crime rate is up. How does it compare nationally? I don't know. Because while our numbers are in, the national numbers are not. And so when we say we want to stay 25% below the national numbers, I don't know what that number is, but I can tell you across the country, violent crime is up. And so we're likely going to meet that. It's just that I can't, in the first day of February, tell you exactly what those numbers are. Our response time, we continue to be problem solvers in this and trying to find keen efforts and solutions to a challenging response time. And that's 10 minutes from the time the caller calls our dispatch center to the time we're knocking on their door. So we strive to do that. And maintaining a response rate of 75% in our quality service audits. All of these have slides. If you have questions, I would just refer you to when I get to those slides. So our violent crime. Our violent crime rate is made up of aggravated assaults, homicides, robbery, and rape. That's what makes up violent crime. It is part of Part 1 crimes. It is a subset of Part 1 crimes. We have about 10,000 Part 1 crimes, and violent crimes make up about 13% of that, about 1,300 of those. So it is a small subset or smaller subset in the overall Part 1 crimes. It did raise the leader or the driving factor on the increase is aggravated assaults. And that is a assault with serious injury or assault with a weapon. Those are up about 20%. And aggravated assaults make 64% of the violent crime. So a movement in aggravated assaults is going to certainly make a difference in the overall numbers. But and if you're curious about weapons associated with that, knives seem to be the weapon that is driving that increase more than anything else. So assaults with knives have driven that. But as the national numbers come in, we'll be able to put identify the average and then the 25% from that. We're already below the national average, even with that number. But whether that falls within the 25% below, we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait for those numbers. But again, from everything we're seeing, it's up across the board nationwide. Our dispatch time. We have made a number of efforts. You can see that through the mid-teens, 15, 16, 17, we're flirting with those numbers. We used to measure response time from the time the dispatcher dispatched the call until the time we got there, which is basically just the officer response time. I view that as, that's like saying the checkout time at the grocery store was very quick, but but you're not taking into account the time you had to waiting for your turn to go through the checkout. So we changed that to say what's true customer service, and what's true customer service is when they call the police department and say, I need an officer, that time starts then, not the time when a dispatcher actually says, now I have an officer available and now I can send that officer to that call. So we strive to meet those 10 minutes based on that new standard, and we've been able to continue to achieve that. Now there's some teams that have more difficulty achieving that than other teams. And the more geographically large the team is, the more difficulty they have meeting those. With the opening of 6601 Pine Lake Road, that's improved response time in the Southeast team. We did a boundary study about 3 years ago with the help of several of the council persons at the time. And we were able to make some adjustments to also improve our response time associated to that. We continue to strive and be problem solvers to get our officers there as quickly as we can on priority 1 and 2 calls. Certainly, once those priorities start dropping, our response time also drops. When you're thinking of you know, a larceny with, a theft with no suspects, there's no immediacy that an officer get there in 10 minutes. But an in-progress call, we believe it's necessary and appropriate for us to get there as quickly as possible. We're continuing to meet that standard, and we continue to problem solve to continue so. So, building a more equitable and inclusive and resilient city was one of the issues I had mentioned before. We continue to seek out expertise to guide our efforts in recruiting. We have a contract with Swanson Russell. They've put out and are assisting us with recruitment of, again, a more diverse group of employees. We've done a number of videos, changed some of our policies and practices to attract a larger pool of candidates. We are looking at adding a recruitment coordinator from within, because we continue to chase the challenges of recruitment, and we need to get ahead of that. So we're looking at adding a recruitment coordinator from the numbers we already have. So it's just reassigning somebody to truly focus on recruitment and who are we trying to identify and get in our applicant pool so that we can test and hire and promote. And we continue to be present on a wide variety of community boards, neighborhood associations. It's actually fairly impressive when you see a list of engagement by all of our employees and how active they truly are. And just representative of the type of people we like to hire. And it's those type of people who want to be engaged, who want to be part of the community and make their community better. And we see that in all aspects in all ranks of our department. 75% of the quality service audits, as has been stated in the past, we do a quality service audit. They're randomly drawn from people involved in accidents, have been a victim of a crime, and has received a traffic citation. We call them through and walk them through a set of survey questions. We collect that data. We share with the officers, because if the public has positive comments, we want to make sure that the employee knows that they're doing a good job, and if they have concerns, we also want to make sure the employee knows that the citizen may have had issue with any specific area of their contact. But we also ask the public, how safe and secure do you feel in the neighborhood where you live? Our goal is 75%, and even in a year with civil unrest, not only locally, but we're impacted to some degree on some of these survey questions based on national events, that people can be influenced on the response by national events, but that we continue to maintain a number that's above our expectations, our goal, and is actually commensurate with many of the years past. So I see that as a positive outcome. Committed time for our police officers. You can measure police officers in any number of ways. One of the ways you can do that by officers per thousand. You can do that by committed time. You can do that by budgetary focus. But one of the things we do is we try to identify the committed time for a Lincoln police officer right now, and try to keep it below 60%. And that would be calls for service. That would be activities where they're not available to take calls for service. Last year we were above that. This year we're slightly below. Our numbers for calls for service are approximate. They're within 0.25% of years past, but I would tell you the COVID pandemic has had a significant impact on our calls. And you can imagine our accidents are down, shoplifts are down. Why are shoplifts down? Because businesses are closed to some degree. And so there are certain aspects that we would have normally done that just weren't present in a COVID environment. And so our committed time was right along the lines of where we would be concerned, but it's the non-committed time that we look to our officers to engage positively with the public. I teach anti-bias training, and one of the prime tenets is positive contact theory. Is when you're engaging with the public in positive events, and so you're not always viewing contacts as negative, and thus you associate with those contacts negatively. So we want our officers to have positive contacts. We want them to do proactive patrol, that being traffic. That's not committed time, that's non-committed time, that they go out and they ensure that the roadways are safe and are able to patrol the neighborhoods for other violations, all non-committed time. But the more positive contact they have, the more support from the public we get. The more support from the public we get, the more citizens are willing to be witnesses, victims, and help us in not just as in our police work, but within keeping Lincoln safe for everyone. So that's why it's so critical, and that's why we watch that so closely.
I just had a quick question. This is one of the biggest differences between Lincoln and Omaha, correct? The Omaha has less committed time than Lincoln does, or am I misunderstanding?
You know, I can find that out for you. I don't know what Omaha's numbers, I know what ours are, but I brought my little blank notebook just for that very purpose, so I'll write that down. Omaha does police differently than Lincoln does. Lincoln tends to be generalist officer concept, where an officer will take any crime and then will follow it through to the end with some support from some of our units. But in Omaha, they tend to just be the initial report taker and then pass it off to a specialized group. So that is a fact. I just don't know. Yeah. So during the pandemic, again, it had a significant impact. We tried to find adapted ways for the public to request our assistance. We've expanded some online reporting. We've had officers who have had COVID or are at home in COVID have the opportunity, if they feel well enough, they can do online report taking. So they're actually talking to an officer, and this is up to the public if they choose. And we've expanded telephone reporting to some degree to allow a little bit broader, that you can just on our website you have the ability to pull up our online reporting and report certain types of crimes. We do about 800-900 of those a year, but 800 or 900 reports, online reports a year, is probably the work of several officers. And so the fact that they can do that themselves, and all of these, no suspect, all of these aren't felony crimes, they're all misdemeanor crimes. If you can think if somebody stole your garden gnome from your yard but you don't know who it is, your cell phone, often to replace your cell phone you need a case number. You can report that online if you don't know where you lost it or how it was lost, but it provides a benefit to the public. Ensuring the viability of our workplace, we got to take care of the staff. So we did modified work schedules. We decentralized and continue to be decentralized in some aspects. Our department, for example, our criminal unit works very closely in confined quarters. We have split them up using some space from the Parks Department, some from CDIS, who have both graciously allowed us to use some of their free space. We continue to split our communication center, a critical component of our policing, in that some of them work out of the backup center, some of them work out of our primary center, so that a rash of COVID infections may not take down the whole unit. So we continue to try to do that. And again, we collaborate across all first responders in how we provide our services to the public. And we try to follow best practices, including providing PPE to our staff. We do, if anybody calls in, they're walked through a couple questions to see if there's COVID in the home, so that we can alert officers to the varying degrees of PPE they have available to them to try to minimize that. To date, we've had 85 city LPD employees that have had COVID positive results, which is just short of 20% of our staff. Of those, about at least 2 were in the hospital for serious COVID-related treatments. But to date, there is nobody in the hospital. and we're looking at vaccinations in the near future. Some additional data that may draw some questions from you. Again, our calls to service were about just 0.25% lower than an average year. This again, I don't know because I don't have a crystal ball, but absent a COVID year, probably would have been above what we would normally see. But you have to take a balance because there's some areas that are down, there's some areas that are up. But bottom line is our numbers were the same for last year, essentially for calls for service. Mental health. Our mental health was about 17% increased in 2020 over the average of 2015 to 2019. These mental health would include EPCs, EPC investigations, suicides, and suicide attempts. And so we continue to work diligently to manage these. Even with the increase in number of investigations, our actual EPCs are down from an average of 13% to about 8%. So we're trying to find solutions rather than just commitment. We're doing that through the $150,000 mental health that was provided, dollars toward our budget from the mental health for the mayor's office and the council provided. We have a mental health coordinator that is now working diligently with the mental health providers, as well as I believe some on the council and other service providers to really work on this area. It is a challenge often for us as an actual EPC. There are limited beds in Lancaster County, and that often means we're driving to Hastings, Norfolk, Omaha to find a safe bed for individuals who are fully EPC'd, and that's certainly a time commitment of our staff, because if we go out of town, we're sending not just one officer, we're sending two officers for the safety of the officer, but also the safety of the person transported, in a sense of if emergency happens on the way, you have somebody other than the original officer to assist. So everything we do toward the mental health side is designed to try to keep the individual in crisis out of jail if there's no criminal activity, and we try to separate that and ensure that they're getting the assistance they need before it becomes criminal in nature. And now we have to add another component to their worries. Some issues that probably talked about, I know we talked about last year, computer-aided dispatch. This is something that was much needed by our communication center. We are effectively working through the transition from the old CAD system to the new CAD system. We expect completion in July this year. If you remember, this was paid for by the remainder of the quarter-cent sales tax and some public service commission dollars that can be used for that purpose. Our body-worn cameras, the dollars that were provided for, we have initiated our body-worn camera program. All uniformed officers that are working the street will leave the station with a body-worn camera. And there are a number of expectations that go along with that, include sporadic review. We'll review anything that needs reviewed, but there are spot checks of body-worn cameras. Our staff have found them very, very valuable in the work that they do, and are glad that they have the opportunity to wear them. Hybrid vehicles. This was something that initial dollars were provided by then councilperson Gaylord Baird, who provided us monies for the initial 6. It took a little while to get to because as a technology tester, there was a little bit of trouble in the manufacture and delivery of these vehicles. So we got them fairly late, but we have purchased, I believe, another 16 hybrid vehicles, and all of our vehicles this year are hybrid. They've been found by our staff to be very as rugged as a normal vehicle, as a normal gasoline-powered only vehicle. We have, we'll continue to move along those lines. There's some added cost to the vehicles, and the higher the gas becomes, the more economical a hybrid vehicle becomes. But we're getting much better gas mileage with our hybrid vehicles, again, without any cost to our performance or our mission. So that's good. Electronic citation and accident reports were mandated by the state Supreme Court. That initially would have come with great cost, but we're able to partner with the Nebraska State Patrol through a system that they operate, and all of our marked units now have electronic citation capability. And so the expectation from the state courts are, if you write a ticket, and you can write a ticket electronically, that you do. So it's not that we won't write any handwritten tickets anymore, but a vast majority of our tickets will be electronically generated. With that has brought some transition. We're working through that transition because it's one of many changes that the Lincoln Police Department has went through recently. And so that's just one more thing. Our fleet maintenance facility is now open. It's 100 Oak Creek Drive. If you haven't had a chance to stop by and tour it, feel free to do so. It's a fantastic facility, and I think long-term in coming. So we're really excited about the added capabilities that brings. 2021, just so you know, NIBRS and our records management system are one and the same. NIBRS is a national change, where the electronic citation was a state mandate. NIBRS is a national mandate from the FBI. We used to report based on UCR, and now it's the National Incident-Based Reporting System, which is a lot more information, a lot more boxes to check, a lot more information to input. But it will go hand in hand with our new records management system. But it is being built internally, which is odd. Most people go out and buy a new RMS system that has NIBRS capabilities. Our staff, especially our lead IT staff, which is Claire Lindquist, who's been an employee for over 50 years, who's built this system and from the ground up, has led us through that at great savings to the city and great benefit for our staff, because he can design it specifically to our needs. We're still looking at the Northeast standalone facility. Again, our goal is always to protect the health and well-being of our staff while we can provide a quality service to our community. You have them in front of you. Certainly, if you want to add those to your questions as we go through, maybe more of a challenge for me to read than you to read. But and so the next few slides, and then our questions.
Richard?
Yes.
Chief, numbers that I'm looking at show that we have authorized street officer strength of 358 officers,
That's correct.
and we currently have 330.
We just started an academy class,
Okay,
so we're now at 354.
okay. And my numbers also show that we lost ground in 2020,
That's correct.
that we had more officers leave the department than joined.
That's correct.
Where are they going, and how do we address that issue?
We lose on average around 19 employees a year. That's from 2008 to today. I keep those numbers, so those are pretty accurate. In 2020, we lost 30, and we've already lost several this month. Some of those have went to Omaha. Some of those have went to other law enforcement agencies. Some of those are just straight retirements. I've done my 25 or more years, and they've walked out the door. The COVID and social unrest led to some departures to non-law enforcement, the challenges of law enforcement. But it was absolutely heavier in 2020 than it has been in the past. And in 2020, we lost nobody to Omaha because I don't know that Omaha had a hiring class. And had they, that number may have been even higher. So I, coming from another agency, I came from the Hastings Police Department many years ago. You know, sometimes in the past, we've kind of looked at it. Some of this is just geography. Some of the employees that have went to other agencies do so because their spouse works in the Omaha area, and their commute of an hour a day or 2 hours a day, hour to get here, hour back, becomes a quality of life issue when you're going, okay, 10 hours a week, I'm just driving. Whereas if we both lived in town here, it'd be 15 minutes, and that'd be changed. So some of that's just plain geography. We don't have a mandate, a residency mandate. But so some of that is that. Some of it has been, we had a helicopter pilot in the military that wanted to fly a helicopter. We don't have a helicopter, and I don't recommend Lincoln having a helicopter, but Omaha does. And so to have a career path that may include flying a helicopter had to go. Some of it's wage and pay. I can tell you we had narrowed the gap with Omaha to some degree, but Omaha's also now seeing some pay increases because they just are. I mean, I'm not part of their negotiations, but they're seeing some pay increases that will again continue will continue to at least keep comparable with Lincoln.
I'd like to follow up with that because some of the discussion I've heard includes this idea that Lincoln Police Department engages in this generalist officer model,
Right.
whereas other places like Omaha have specialist models. And the work conditions under that system may encourage some people to leave.
It encourages some people to leave, yes. The danger is inherent in law enforcement no matter what type of philosophy you operate on. So I'm not questioning that, and Omaha is a very successful professional organization. So, but I came from an organization that kind of followed the specialist model, and I really bloomed in Lincoln because you're able to use your skills more. So for some people, it's good to be here because you may not ever get to be a specialist. I mean, you could still do the many things that a specialist does in Omaha as a street officer here. If you can become a specialist, it's a really good job. And we have some of those specialties here, but the numbers are very few comparatively. And it's a little bit more challenging because of those smaller numbers. But yes, there are some people who would prefer to just respond to a call, take the initial report, and then be done with it. Go home with nothing on your head, nothing you have to, okay, tomorrow I have to do this. That's factual. If that's your responsibility, you should always be thinking ahead, going, these are the things I needed to do. You're not just walking in going, well, what's new for me today? You already have a long list of things to do because that's already there. But for some people, like myself, I really relish that type of thing. For others, there is more of a comfort to be able to be done once your day is done and not start again the next day. So preference of the individual officer. So I've been very lucky also to be able to be in many of these special assignments. So not everybody has the same success and may not have the same career satisfaction that I've had.
Councilperson Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. Chief Jackson, if we were to go to a specialist model, would it change the number of officers that we needed on the force to provide the same street services and the community engagement?
While we'd have to study to see what those would exactly be, I would say yes, it would increase the numbers. I mean, it's like many things we do is that I wear many hats and have many responsibilities. A police officer has many hats and many responsibilities. If you focus those responsibilities, then you also have to find people to do those other tasks, those other responsibilities, which means more people. Having always operated in this philosophy since I started in 1987, I'm not necessarily, I haven't put pen to paper to go, okay, if we were to do that, and our specialty units are bigger now than they were 4 years ago and bigger now than they were 10 years ago. because there's just some things street officers can't do, downloading phones, some of the video forensics that we need assistance with. So we've had to increase some of our specialist positions, but to go to a full one, and that if you work a auto theft, the original officer takes the call and just turns it into somebody else to track down, it would be my belief it would also come with additional staffing needs,
Thank you.
or at least likely to. And again, I would have to back that out.
Fair enough, thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Jackson? I'm sure we'll have some sometime.
Okay, well, I get to introduce the fire department, another professional agency for the city of Lincoln, and its interim chief, Dave Engler.
Thank you, Chief.
I'll give you my water. I don't think you want it.
That wouldn't work with this code thing. Good afternoon. Pleased to be here on behalf of the firefighters and paramedics and EMTs with Lincoln Fire and Rescue to talk about our performance. And we redid our mission statement a couple years ago, and our mission is to protect lives, property, and the environment through the highest level of professionalism while working efficiently as a team with the community and the resources provided. So here are the performance goals that we have married to the budget. And one thing I do want to specify is we have a number of other performance goals that inside our department that we strive to meet, which also has an effect on these. So you can think of these as the bigger performance goals, and then there are a lot of subsets that we utilize to measure that performance and make sure that we're able to meet these in every area. So I will go over these. The first one is we want to achieve a CPR fraction of at least 80%. And we didn't make this number up. It actually comes from the American Heart Association, and that CPR fraction helps, and what it is just continuous compressions and keeping the blood flowing through our patients. And what that does is it actually improves the chance of survival in cardiac arrest. So this is a very important statistic that we utilize to measure our performance. And what you'll see is that we've met it in the 2019-2020 at 95%. And what we're doing is we are upping our target as an individual organization to 90% as we move forward in the upcoming budget year to help us hopefully improve our cardiac arrest saves, which in Lincoln are really good. Our next one is we will stop the fire at the room of origin for at least 80% of the structure fires. So again, response time matters, and the ability to put the fire out quickly matters. The advantages to this are if we minimize the damage, we can get the occupant back in the home as quick as possible. And so the longer the person's out of the home, of course, there's more costs for relocation and having an abandoned house and all that. So the quicker we get there, minimize it, take care of the problem, the better for that homeowner. It decreases the fire loss and keeps the insurance costs down, and that's good for the whole city to have lower insurance costs. And then we all know that aside from being very ugly, the burned out houses that you drive by, they can attract just crime and that sort of thing because they're houses that are unattended. They don't look good and they bring property values down. So we want to make sure that the sooner we get there, we prevent that. We confine it to just the area of origin. How'd we do in 2019, 2020? Well, our target, I said, was 80%, and we were at 83%. And we're raising that target to 85%, and we believe that we're going to see a little bit better performance because we've opened up Station 15 and Station 16. So our response times will be better, and we've got more companies to draw from. So when companies are out and other calls come in, it creates kind of a domino effect, and it makes your response times longer. So by having the more resources spread out, we'll get there faster, we'll take care of the problem, and then on top of that, we're not drawing from other areas as much. So we think that we'll be able to meet that 85% goal, and we thank our elected officials and our citizens for supporting that effort. Our next performance goal is Lincoln Fire and Rescue will maintain a cardiac survival rate higher than the national average. And as you know, we've done a really good job in Lincoln with being a top performer in the cardiac arrest survival. Now this year's a little bit odd with COVID, and we're not sure how this totally affects, but cardiac survival is the one thing that for EMS or emergency medical services that is something that you can actually measure. Now what we can't measure is we can't measure the number of people that call 911 with, say, chest pain. And we get there and we treat their chest pain and we make everything better and we transport them to the hospital. And we don't know, because we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know if they would have went into cardiac arrest and died, or that stroke patient that we get to the hospital quick and they get treatment. So cardiac arrest is the only real thing that you can measure by saying, hey, this person was not alive and we brought them back. So that's why there aren't a lot of other measures in this, but I would argue that just from what we see on the streets, we're doing really well. The numbers are down this year, but this is a small data set, which makes it tough to evaluate in 1 year. And then with COVID, it makes it a little bit more difficult to evaluate. Now, what you won't see is the national standard. So we may be surpassing that national standard, but the national numbers aren't in yet because it takes them a long time to put together. I think just like Chief Jackson was saying, to get those national numbers, there's a delay, and we're probably going to see that around April. So it's quite possible that we did do better than the national standard, but we are at 35% this year. And we also had a 35% increase in cardiac arrests and an 11.2 reduction in the number of patients surviving ventricular fibrillation. What we did was we were concerned about this because it just doesn't follow the pattern that we have performed to in years past. So we took this to Lincoln's cardiologist for a little bit of a better explanation. And we don't have a great explanation on what caused this year, but we do know that national trends show delays in patient care due to donning of personal protective equipment. And what they've said is nationally, there's up to 2 minutes delay to don that personal protective equipment that we're adding because of COVID, which could potentially be delaying treatment to the patient. And that's something that nationally they're exploring a little bit more. One of the other things that they've found is people are delaying calling 911 for fear of being exposed to COVID. And I think you heard early on in the process, we were telling people, hey, if you have a medical emergency, make sure you're calling 911, because a lot of people were scared of contacting anyone, scared of going to the hospital. So they were really waiting until they were in dire straits before they called. And that could have an effect on the cardiac arrest numbers. And then there are additional health issues as a result of COVID that they're finding with, cardiac problems and breathing problems and all those that are longer term effects of COVID in some patients that they think may be making people more difficult to resuscitate. So these are all things, I'm not using excuses, I guess. What I'm saying is these are things that they're continuing to study to try to explain these numbers, because they are seeing a little bit of a downward trend in this.
Still higher than the national average, though.
We believe that we are still higher than the national average, and we're waiting for those numbers to actually come out so we know for sure. But this year is just a different year, and so we certainly, if we had a couple years of similar outcomes, we'd probably
concerned.
yeah. But right now, we're not there yet. So our next is Lincoln Fire and Rescue ambulances will have a response time of 8 minutes or less 90% of the time to emergent medical incidents. And as you can see in years past, and these are early numbers for 2020, and we believe these are going to be fairly close to actual numbers, but we're still analyzing the data. And this is kind of a difficult one because this includes what we call Delta and Echo responses. So those are the highest priority medicals that we have. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the patient, that's how they're categorized by when the dispatchers take the call. That doesn't necessarily mean that the patients are in that type of condition when we get there. And so what we have to do is we have to look at the individual calls, and for some of those, if there's the potential for violence or something, we have to actually go into those calls because our units don't respond emergency. They'll respond non-emergency until the police can clear the scene. So what we have to do is we have to actually go in and individually eliminate them from the pool. So this is kind of a difficult statistic to get. You know, it takes a while, but we think we're fairly close to this. And what we've done to try to improve it over time is we've moved a unit from downtown, which was Medic 1, to Medic 10 at the new station on 24th and Superior. So what we were hoping is this would improve the response to that area of town and improve our response times. We do anticipate big improvement when we put the new computer-aided dispatch system in. And as you can see, you know, the performance has been below our 90% goal all along. And I think a lot of that has to do with technology because we are not able to always know when that closest unit's there. So a lot of times we're sending what we think is the closest unit, and it may not necessarily be. So that's the downfall. But again, that computer-aided dispatch should help improve these response times. And we're looking forward to really seeing what effect it has on our response times, because then we can make the other organizational changes to try to get those response times up. So that's going to be a critical factor. The other thing we do to try to meet these is we up staff on days where we anticipate high call volume, i.e. Nebraska football game days. That's traditionally one where we have a higher call volume, so we'll often call in additional personnel and additional units to take care of that. And then secondly, the weather event of like last Monday, when we have weather events that we believe are going to cause extended travel times to our calls, we'll call in additional crews, which we did, to try to make sure that we're able to serve the citizens on those days. This statistic, again, doesn't necessarily affect the outcomes, although we definitely want to meet it. We are looking at whether we're getting the calls, the ambulances or medic units there 90% of the time in 8 minutes on actual critical patients. So what we're doing is we're trying to even bring this down from 80% or 8 minutes 90% of the time on Delta and Echo responses to what was the actual patient condition when we got there, and are we meeting it on those patients, because that's where the actual difference is going to be. And the other thing is we're getting our engine companies there with first responders very quickly to initiate patient care. So even though the ambulance may take a little bit more time, we're getting someone to the patient's side to begin treatment. So this is definitely something we want to continue to work on and improve, but I don't believe that it has a significant impact on patient outcomes. And here is from the budget book the number of FTEs that we've got. And what you'll see there is in 2020, we've got 20.5 employees in the grants and aid fund. 15 of those are from the SAFER grant that we've got. And here's the kind of the breakdown of each classification. And you can see that we do, on a number of these positions, we take them out of separate funds. We cost them to different funds to reflect the work they're doing out of those different funds. Here's the EMS Enterprise Fund, number of personnel. And then here's going to be the general fund numbers. The grants and aid fund, so that covers our urban search and rescue, which receives federal funds, as well as the SAFER grant that covers 15 of our firefighters. And then here's the numbers for the EMS Transport Fund. Okay, and some of the things we've done in 2020, I wanted to just give you an overview of some of our successes. We were very pleased to put all 7 of our new fire engines in service, and they are making a huge impact on our ability to serve and not have companies out of service routinely. So that is a real positive. We moved the ladder truck from Station 7 out to Station 12 with the idea of just improving the coverage to that southeast area of Lincoln. And so that was a big improvement in getting that first ladder truck to the scene, and just a better distribution of resources. We opened up Station 16, and we created an internal diversity, equity, and inclusivity task force. And what we did is we are evaluating we've got people from different diverse backgrounds within that committee, evaluating a lot of our practices and policies, and just talking about how we can make the organization better in that respect. We've got some training coming up, which I think is going to be very beneficial. The training is done by it's called the Career Survival Group, and they're going to be talking about how we deal with some of our customers out there when they're making comments, and it's kind of de-escalation techniques to our personnel and stuff, and just how to handle that effectively and try to de-escalate the situation. And then we've also got we've got some training coming up with an attorney who she represents the group Women in Fire, and she specializes in this area. And she's going to be providing all our personnel, or especially it's going to be for all personnel, but then we're going to have additional for captains and battalion chiefs on how to deal with different issues within the department with diversity, harassment, bullying, and try to prevent all that, and how to adequately deal with it, because we all think we know how to deal with it. But we need to provide the training to ensure that that's the case, and then make sure that everyone understands what the expectations are. And so that's some of the training coming up that we're excited to present to our personnel in 2021 that we started the conversation in 2020. And then vaccinations for EMTs and paramedics. And that was a huge one for us. We were very excited about. And we've had 36 of our employees with COVID to date. That's about 11% of our workforce. Our personnel were very good about wearing PPE. I mean, when you think about all the people they encountered on these calls, and sometimes it was multiple people with COVID per day. They did a great job of wearing PPE, decontaminating, and taking all the precautions. So to have 36 was, it may sound a lot, but really in our organization of 325, that's a pretty small number, and they did a good job with preventing that. Next, we had 2 recruit academies in 2020, and of course, that was a challenge with COVID. And so we had to make special arrangements to make sure that we could get people trained and not have people infected. So that was masks, social distancing. Instead of having people in a classroom, we moved them to a larger area where we could spread out. And at times we had to make smaller groups, so we were able to accommodate that. We continue to have hiring challenges, especially with our paramedics. And it's just because there's just not a lot of people that are entering paramedic school. And those that do, you know, some of them make great employees, but some just don't fit our organization for one reason or another. It may be a background issue or something to that effect. So we continue to struggle with that. And then we had the battalion chief promotional process. And what we're experiencing right now is a little bit concerning, that people aren't real excited to join the rank of battalion chief to become management. And so we're exploring that. We only had 6 that entered into the test, and we could have multiple promotions depending on how the next 2 years go. So we need to do a better job of exploring why that is and trying to encourage people to enter into that process. Obviously, having good managers for this department is very important moving forward into the future of the organization. We have an agreement on land purchase for Station 17. It's Wilderness Hills Boulevard and South 40th Street, just south of 40th and Yankee Hill Road, so we're excited about that. I talked about the implementation of the new computer-aided dispatch system. Very excited for that. I think I'm not naive enough to think that it's going to work perfectly right out of the chute, but I think once we get things dialed in, it's going to be incredible in improving our response times and the service that we provide our citizens. The other thing that we will hopefully have wrapped up in April is what we call the Pacheco Ross Facility Study. And what we're doing with this study is we are evaluating our stations, our existing fire stations, much like we did our apparatus, and giving it grades. So we hired a company, I believe they're out of New York State, that partnered up with other experts in the area, and they're doing a facility evaluation for us. So we're very excited about finding out where we're at with that and whether we need to renovate or whether we need to look at rebuilding and how we best spend dollars on that. So that should be coming, and we hope it'll be concluded in April. These are a couple of things out of our strategic plan that I just wanted to share with you. Our strategic plan was created, and it had internal and external stakeholders and kind of set the expectations for what Lincoln Fire and Rescue does. And so we've got the strategic initiatives, and again, you'll see some of those are some of the same performance standards that we use for the budget, but there are some additional that we use there too. And there's been a couple of recent cases in the media lately about cardiac arrests and saves and stuff. And so when we're talking about numbers and what they mean, I wanted to kind of humanize this with a little bit of a story from this picture here. You'll see this child, this infant. One night at Fire Station 2, a car comes screeching up onto the apparatus bay or apparatus approach, and fierce knocking on the door, And when this firefighter paramedic, who happens to be my wife, full disclosure, opened the door, handed this child not breathing and no pulse. And so she initiated CPR, got the crew together, they did resuscitative efforts, and this child ended up surviving. They found that there was it went to Children's and they found the problem. So anyway, the child came back to visit, and that's what the picture was. But I think, sometimes it always helps saying, hey, these numbers are very important, but they're attached to outcomes, and this is one of those positive outcomes that we experienced at Lincoln Fire and Rescue. And then here again, the category serve, and we want to definitely meet the increasing service demands over the coming years. And so how do we do that? And it goes into a couple of our other things that we keep the annual growth rate of structure fire instances at or below the population rate. We, again, confine the fire to the room of origin, 0 firefighter line of duty deaths. So those are some of the things that we continue to work on. And then value. We want to make sure that we, as an organization, are good with performance, but also good with value. So we're not wasting resources, we're not wasting money. So value is another one of those strategic initiatives that we have implemented. And with that, I'll offer questions after the presentation.
Okay. Thank you so much. Councilperson Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 4 questions. When you're talking about cardiac survival rates, I had a discussion with somebody not too long ago suggesting that CPR could be part of the LPS high school curriculum, and the LFR could be the organization to provide those classes. Do you think that's possible, and would that have a positive impact in your opinion?
I think the more people that have CPR training, absolutely, definitely positive. As far as us being able to provide it, so not everyone can teach CPR. You have to have an instructor certification. We've got personnel. I don't know the exact numbers on the number of personnel that are actual instructors, but it would be difficult to train that many people with our existing staff. However, there are other organizations that possibly we could partner up with, but certainly CPR is a value. And one thing we did see over the last year that was a little bit surprising was we did see an increase in bystander CPR, which is fabulous. That's where we want to go as a community. And with COVID, I'm a little bit surprised, but keep in mind, the real focus on CPR now that we're training people to is hands-only CPR. So just putting your hand on the chest and providing that CPR. So maybe the citizens have received that message and weren't afraid, even in the COVID environment. So, but yes, the more people we train, the better.
Got 3 more questions. Your overtime budget for this current budget cycle was cut by $500,000. And my understanding is currently that has been spent. Is that true?
Yes. I don't know if it's been 100% spent, but what we did find in December, we found that we were on track to spend that money at the end of November, that we didn't have much left. So what we are doing is we're working through, we had a number of openings that hadn't been filled. So we've got a recruit academy that we've got right now, 15 personnel. Actually, on Wednesday night, they're graduating with their badge, which we're excited about. But those personnel are in training, and so they're going to be moving to the apparatus and filling those holes. So what we will see is a decrease in the overtime usage, and then to make up any deficit there, we'll have to pull it from some of the savings that we used from not filling the position at the time from having those openings. But we were impacted by the cut in the overtime. And the way we operate, we'll never be fully staffed because we have people leave and you can't have a recruit academy for one. So what we've got to do is we've got to wait until we've got a number of people gone before we can have that academy. Then the academy takes 18 weeks. So there's always going to be that need for overtime, and it's going to vary. And so we've got 13 people on average leaving per year for one reason or another. And so we try to kind of plan for that, but it's not all at once, and it's very sporadic. So that does create a challenge for us.
Okay. Another question. My understanding is in the 1960s, Lincoln Fire and Rescue had 4 truck companies. And in 2021, we have 4 truck companies. In spite of the growth of our city geographically and in population, special events going on, do we need a 5th truck company, and what kind of resources would that take, and what would it look like to add a 5th truck company?
Okay. The best I can tell you is I believe the last truck company was added in Lincoln in 1954. I might be wrong on that, but from the history books, that's probably, it looks like that's the accurate figure.
That's longer than anybody here except for Richard.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Zing.
We're looking at,
Thanks to that. I'm still there.
we did move Truck 7 to Station 12 in order to better cover the city. What we are finding is the south area, the 40th and Yankee Hill area, a little bit north of there and then south, and that's where the growth is going to be, is kind of an area that is currently, it's a longer response for our truck company to get there. It's outside of our response goals for truck companies. So with Station 17, and we don't know exactly when that station would be built and staffed, but I think it's a good time to have a conversation for that additional truck company to go there. One of our challenges is a lot of our older stations will not accommodate the apparatus that we need. So what you're seeing is we're building stations with 4 apparatus bays, and that allows us, depending on the need as the city grows, for an engine, a truck, a medic unit, and then a specialty vehicle, whether it be a battalion chief, a EMS supervisor, or something like that. So we're kind of building our stations with the desire to be able to accommodate that growth as it happens. Because like right now, for instance, if I wanted to put a ladder truck at Station 4 at 27th and Old Cheney, first of all, there's not enough room to accommodate the number of personnel, and there's not enough room to put the truck in there. So that's kind of been a shift in our department mentality. And to staff a truck company, you're looking at 12 additional personnel, plus if you want to figure in the vacations and stuff. So hopefully that answers your question adequately. Okay.
Do you have any more?
That'll do for now.
Anybody else have any questions at this point? I did, and I think you answered it. How many emergency calls for health instead of fire? What's the difference between the two?
For medical emergency?
Yeah, medical emergency compared to fire.
So we operate typically around, it varies year to year. And we're talking about probably anywhere from 78% medical to 81% medical. It kind of fluctuates in that. I don't know this year exactly because again, we haven't totally solidified our numbers. Now, when you talk about fire, there's fire, and then obviously one of our we want to protect the environment as part of our missions. So we've got the hazmat and all that stuff. So those are other calls, but typically, just roughly, I would say 80% of our calls are medical. We've been down to 75%, but it fluctuates year to year.
Do we have a need for more medical units, for more EMTs, more
Absolutely. You know, the challenge that we have is we operate our EMS on the enterprise funds. So we try to be really good stewards of that. And we try to balance the number of units we've got with the funds, so we're not begging for tax dollars and that sort of thing. Obviously, you can tell by our responses that I gave, we're not meeting that 90% goal. And how do you meet the 90% goal? Well, we think the CAD is going to help really help us determine if we're getting the closest unit there. That's going to help, and we expect to see an improvement. But then after that, the question is going to be is, do we have enough units to actually meet that goal? And that's kind of step 2 in the process. But I would say cities this size, you're probably looking at 8 or 9 units typically. We've been working with 7. And we do, like I said, we do upstaff when we foresee a need or a potential need to try to meet that occasional need.
Okay. And you also said weather has been affecting your budget and overtime? Is that correct? Because you upstaff during the weather?
Weather doesn't necessarily affect the budget. What we do is weather is a consideration for upstaffing. And then, again, that does come out of the enterprise fund when we upstaff the medic units.
And the fire? Do we upstaff the fire?
Fire, we do occasionally, and a great example is the 4th of July. We have a significant amount of calls on the 4th of July. Many of them are fires, as you can imagine. And so it's not atypical for us to put one additional engine company, maybe even 2, and then some additional medic units to handle that call volume. So we do that, and that comes out of general fund.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I'll bring up, is Director Lopez? See her.
Oh, we can just sit here and talk to you the whole time, so.
I'd be happy to.
No, thank you for stepping in and serving as chief.
You bet. It is my
Appreciate it.
pleasure. I'm very happy to have this honor.
Slam the door, Director Lopez.
Chief
She makes
Engler.
her own entrance.
Chief Engler, are these a uniform?
Yes, we did purchase these for 2 for each of our personnel, and I don't know if they're all wearing them, but we're highly encouraging them to wear them, so we're all uniform with that. All right, Director Lopez, your turn.
Thank you for coming down.
Thanks for having me. Okay, I just have to move forward here. I just have a few slides to go over with you with some information from the health department. And so you all know our mission is to promote and protect the public health, and that means looking at our community health status, our air, safe food, water, and homes, access to health services. We do a lot of work with our vulnerable populations and looking at our built environment as well. So some of our performance measures include to have 90% of our investigations contact tracing for a reportable communicable disease initiated within 24 hours. And so that's been our contact tracing that you hear a lot about. We have over 100 contact tracers now that we have access to in the community. Our actual from April through December, which included some of our highest peak time, was 85%. I know we vary, but that's basically the average. Right now, we're seeing initiating contact tracing within 24 hours based on our current caseload. We also look at our nuisance complaints. We actually have a lot of nuisance complaints usually, and we want to have them resolved within 30 days. And we've exceeded our actual, where we were at previously, at over 94%, going and moving on. So our target is always over 90% of those. And then the environmental, human exposure to environmental hazards, we were looking about the clean air quality, and we've exceeded where we wanted to be. Our target will remain at 90% for the upcoming year. We want to maintain our rate of food safety complaints at less than 140 per year, and foodborne illness reports at less than 40 per year. We're below that, but I think we all know too, this hasn't been an average year where we would see, but we're going to continue to use that metric as we move forward, anticipating that we are going to, as a community, be back to normal and resuming our in-person dining and all those other activities. We wanted to reduce the number of children needing a dental screening because they've not seen a dentist in the past 12 months. And we set a target of 25%, and we've reduced that to 21%. And actually, our need for dental services actually increased during the pandemic because we were one of the only places open to offer emergent care. And then reducing injury, decrease the rate of individuals in Lincoln injured by dog bites. And we've actually seen a decrease in dog bites, even though there have been more people actually outside in that. And you'll see later on that we've actually had more pet license issued for cats and dogs, which I think is also related to what's happening in our social environment. And our exposure to health hazards, last year we were so excited that through hazmat we had collected over 100,000 pounds of toxic material and kept it from the landfill. We're way down this year. We're at 63,792 pounds, but even that's really a positive sign because we haven't had any hazmat collections since last April until, again, I believe it was October or maybe September when we started having some collections, and that was really a large collection. So I think people really value being able to use that service, and I think we'll continue to see that number increase. We also use data that helps guide our decisions making, especially related to the virus, but we use data for all of the things that we do. And our dashboard is just one of those examples we thought we'd share with you. And then we're monitoring our workload and tracking where we're at with restaurant inspections. We have goals that we follow. Those things are all done online. When the staff do an inspection, there's metrics that they have to meet according to the food safety requirements, and those are followed. We also monitor, for example, on our dental services, individuals. We look at our total number of clients, race, ethnicity, languages. I think you all know we have several multilingual staff, and our staff is really, most of our areas is really representative of our community that we serve. And then I just included a piece on our health fund, our current budget in the health fund, and you'll see there's no changes, obviously, from last year. And our animal control fund is a separate fund. You will see some decrease in there from personnel, and that's primarily related to some changes made, and I'll talk about those in just a few minutes with the staff. And then our clean air and our RBST funds were moved into the health, into environmental health now, and that's a fee-based service that's provided. We haven't changed. You'll see this doesn't reflect any of the changes. It's our current FTE amount that was allocated in the budget. And you'll see the change from the responsible beverage server fund moved in our air fund. We have several grants at the health department. I think you're aware of that, so I just wanted to point that out to you. We have a total of over $6 million in grants. And one of those is our Healthy Families Funds that we provide home visitation services for families. And also, we have a unique project with the library where they come and read to the children in our clinic and provide books for them. So we're really looking forward to a time when we can have that back again. And then our WIC program and nutrition services, all of these services have continued. We've used Facebook and other measures to continue to work with families, and especially with WIC and nutrition service to ensure that the families have access to the food that they need that's allocated in there. Then during 2022, we're assuming that we've really been working with the vulnerable in our community this past year, and we'll continue to look at housing options and resources for quarantine or isolation. I'm happy to tell you all the families that we placed in a different location from the mission have now accessed sustainable permanent housing. And I think that's something we can look at and talk with our homeless coalition about a different model maybe that we can use to help people get into permanent housing sooner. We've been providing materials in multiple languages. We're working with the cultural centers and done a lot with face coverings and protective equipment. We're currently still reducing the density at the People City Mission by having a separate location for several of the men there. And I think that's really critical, and probably one of the reasons we haven't had a major outbreak in our community, and that in the good work of Pastor Tom and following the guidelines we've set out. We've done a lot of testing and having interpreters available, and we're trying to maximize just working with all of our community members in a positive way. Not only are we doing this because of our current environment, but those are just examples that show what we do on a regular basis. Our contact tracing, our public hotline, I know we had over 11,000 calls when we started the registration in about a day and a half. And boy, so many city, county, and county employees stepped up to answer the phone. It was remarkable, the assistance that was provided. And you know, there's a lot of investigation that goes in. There's a contact tracing that happens also to find out, but on the other end, we have our epidemiology team and Tim Timmons areas that's really looking at putting all those pieces together about what might be happening in a certain area or not, so that we can tie in if we have an outbreak and assist with other mitigation efforts. Then we all know about the risk dial, and our staff is meeting probably about the risk dial right now, looking at the data from the last few weeks again to see where we're at. We've done our daily situation updates that I believe the council members receive, and our public dashboard that we use, and then also managing all those outbreak situations. Our vaccine distribution is probably one of the things that's of the greatest interest to people right now. So we're collaborating with state and community partners. You probably heard that with the hospitals, FQHC, pharmacies, the surgical center. And the governor has set out how those are, who's in line for vaccine when, and that's generally following the CDC guidelines. However, there's some variation that the governor is allowed to make. But we've worked with our partners for broad distribution and planning. And then, you know, we've worked, as I've said, with the Chamber of Commerce. Actually, I think I'm doing a little talk there on Wednesday morning again. LIBA, all the different restaurant association, all those different industries to get information out, up-to-date information, and checklists for businesses to operate safely. We still are working with plan development tools. All the health departments are across the state, and to make sure that things are opened up safely and entertainment and other activities can be provided safely. And then the most important factor in our COVID-19 response, and the picture was taken prior to the COVID time, so when you see everybody close together, when I saw that. It's, having our experienced public health nurses, I think our city was ready. We had a pandemic plan that we could go back to. We have public health educators that are experienced, our environmental health specialists, our epidemiologists and communicable disease. And then our leadership really helped us move forward and adapt quickly. Then what we've done is we looked at, as I shared with you, where we were understaffed in communicable disease and epidemiology, in our public information officer and the economic recovery part, and looking at event review and business consultation, which we continue on an ongoing basis in every area. We move forward in working with getting more communicable disease nurses on staff and epidemiologists who actually came to us from the state. They were sad to see him go, but we're fortunate to have him. He's been just really an excellent team member. And then we were fortunate to have Leah Bucka-White join us from, she had been previously at the state and has extensive public health experience. So she's just hit the ground running, and that's been another huge asset for us to allow us to move forward in other areas. We continue to, and will into this next year, use funding that we restate in federal funding and not health fund dollars. Our dental clinic continues to serve our most vulnerable residents in the community, and we have a growing need for services there. And our home visitation for pregnant women and children has been extremely successful even in this process. Our information and referral line is linking people to needed services. We're still providing access to diabetes care and other measures as well. And actually, COVID isn't the only communicable disease we're working with. So we've had additional cases of tuberculosis, we've had E. coli, and our influenza numbers are still very far down. And I guess if that's a unintended consequence of this, that's probably a positive thing, of wearing the mask and the hand washing. But we've seen that in other countries that pass that peak time too, where influenza rates are down. Our chlamydia and gonorrhea cases have, though, steadily been increasing, and we continue to offer those clinical services for those individuals. And one of the things I'm really proud of this year, our animal control team implemented a new shift schedule that was effective January 7th of this year. And that's where you see some of that reduction in the animal control budget, because this will reduce overtime and in addition provide added safety for the officers. And I'm very proud of the team. They worked together to come up with a solution that worked for everyone. And there was no additional staffing added to this. They worked through the solution. So they've done a tremendous job when they also at the same time, during this whole time, they lost one of their valuable team members who passed away. So I have great respect for the hard work they've been doing. And they've been out there every day during the pandemic and responding in the community. Our back calls are about the same. So people are really interested in that. So,
I noticed they're not on there.
and our license sales for cat and dogs it is up, and our animal bites are down. So we're still, that's a study in time for us. So, and then our food safety. We are doing our restaurant inspections. We have a lot of support options for our restaurants and in working with them and providing additional services that they may need. If you can just see our food handler permits are in there. We're slightly down in 19, but we'll have some more updates for you the next budget presentation we do. We're protecting our health through protecting our water. And that's one of the biggest things one of the largest areas we work on is our public swimming pools. That was changed this summer because a lot of pools weren't open. What our work focused on then was how they could be open and do that safely. That was an additional change. And then Has to Go. You can see our big year, and we're down. We'll have a final report for last year here soon. And our air quality monitoring has continued to be, we want to have good air quality at least 90% of the days measured. We're a little bit lower right now. There's going to be a meeting, I believe it's next week, with the Kansas area on their burn-off in Nebraska, the state environmental, and our teams, both from public health. And then, I don't know if you all realize that we do quite a bit of work with child care centers, providing education and resources to them and investigating and managing outbreaks. But a lot of technical assistance goes on there, and that's very well received, and it's one of the areas you'll see on the agenda today that we'll be talking about next week, but just talking about their licensure and some of their permitting. And then we have our chronic disease prevention. And one thing I just want to mention in here, and we'll have additional information, but if you remember, the health department took over the flu vaccine for city and county employees this year, and it went tremendously well. I think we were able to really do it at a cost savings, and it was a great team experience for coworkers to be working with coworkers and seeing they were able to come into several areas and not have people go out. We're also doing additional health screenings, and we'll share some really positive benefits that have happened for employees because of that. And we continue to see a decrease in our tobacco and nicotine use. Then we have our injury prevention. We had to learn how to do car seat inspections and training during a time of COVID. That was really a challenge, but the team managed that, and they've done a really great job. We've also done a lot of fire prevention training, working with the fire department for owners and managers of multi-unit residential areas. And concussion. So I'm going to stop there and see if you have questions for me.
Do we have any questions for Director Lopez? Councilperson Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. Director Lopez, I'd like to know, what do you think are your biggest challenges coming into this year? I mean, I'm looking at calendar right now, but I realize we're halfway through the budget year. But what are your biggest challenges? Where do you think you need additional dollars? I noticed that even though we had approved the PIO for the health department, it looks like it's still vacant.
No, we actually hired.
Oh, okay.
We did hire, Leah's been here almost 2 months.
Okay.
So we did hire that. We hired the 2 nurses in communicable disease and moved them on. There was another position.
The epidemiologist.
No, yes, Blake. We have Blake. We brought him on. We're not asking for, at this point, additional resources. We have tried to maximize every source of federal dollars that we can maximize to use that for people that we need to do vaccinations and some of the other support services that we need to pay for that. And we've kept fire and the police aware, and the mayor's office has worked on that, making sure they're aware of what other funding they can access to assist us.
And then just one more question, if you don't mind. In looking at the Place Matters information, which I know is from the Health Endowment, not from the Health Department, but it still shows a huge discrepancy in life expectancy based on where you live. Is there something that the Health Department can do to help improve life expectancy in Northeast Lincoln?
You know, that is one of the areas we're working on, and I didn't mention that, but we're continuing with our community health assessment, and we have surveys out. And we've done them it's a totally different process than we've ever used before, but we're actually getting information from various neighborhood areas. And we're working with both the health hospitals are partnering with us, and we're developing more direct services. But one of the first things that we're doing, we want to address the health disparities, but one of the other things is just looking at where individuals are living, which you saw on the Place Matters map, which is what we actually assist them developing. But one of the things that we noticed an area for us to address initially is lead. So yes, we are working, and we're working with the cultural centers on that. And I'll be meeting with the cultural centers, I think, yet this week. We're trying to access some additional resources that are available at the state level that could be used to also assist us in addressing some of the health disparities that we're seeing.
Thank you.
So we'll continue to report back to you on that.
Thank you.
Councilperson Christensen.
Yes, Director Lopez, last month, the World Health Organization published some new COVID diagnostic standards because of what they consider to be a high percentage of false positives for the current test protocol. Have we taken a look at that, and what do we think?
You know, yes, we have taken a look at that, and actually working with the folks at the Global Center at Nebraska Medicine, looking at that. And some of those standards that they're looking at aren't the type of tests that we do here, but we're still investigating that and using the people that are the experts in the area. But I know exactly which study you're talking about.
Any other questions for Director Lopez?
I just would like to make a statement. As always, thank you so much for everything that you've been doing during this pandemic and everything that the health department staff has been doing and leading us with expertise and competency and keeping us safe. So thank you so much.
Thank you for all the hard work you've done this year. And it's not over yet.
No, it's not. Every day
Every day
is a new challenge. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none? We'll see in a little bit. Anything else, Mr. Carlson?
Got our next meeting up on the slide right there.
Okay.
And taking down some notes, and any additional information we'll put together and be sure to get back to you.
Sure. If we've got any thoughts, questions, we can get to you.
Always, always.
We know where you live. Okay. Okay. Any other questions for this budget meeting? Seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you.